Welcome to Beyond the Crucible. I'm Warwick Fairfax, the founder of Beyond the Crucible.
The light bulb coming on and starting to ask the question around significance. What's significance? And just really starting to, I was never in the first half of my life trying to look through the lens of what's significance. And so it was during this season that I was like, okay, significance. What does that look like?
That's our guest this week, Chris Arnold, discussing how he dialed into a deeper, more fulfilling calling after he was let go from his six-figure corporate job. It was only after being freed from what he calls the golden handcuffs of that position that he was able to learn the lessons he's packed into his book, From Success to Surrender. He and Warwick go through all of those lessons in this week's episode, including success isn't measured by what we achieve, but by who we become. And our greatest growth often comes through our deepest struggles.
Well, Chris, welcome. It's wonderful to have you on the podcast, and definitely enjoy learning more about you and reading your book, From Success to Surrender. Love that title. Finding your true purpose in God's perfect timing. So we're going to talk quite a bit about what success to surrender means and a bit about Chris. Chris has spent 25 plus years as a founder, executive CEO, and advisor, launching ventures, leading teams, and helping leaders navigate growth, crisis, and transition. Says he lives in Indiana, in Zionsville. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And with his wife, Lisa. And I know you have two kids, having read the book, a son and a daughter. And you're active in your local community and mentor leaders and couples in the seasons of change. And I also saw another page that you speak from the boardroom and the breaking point, former corporate director and business advisor. He's lived a painful gap between success and significance. His journey through job loss, financial uncertainty, and spiritual awakening uniquely position him to guide leaders seeking purpose in the marketplace. So a lot of good stuff. I love the phrases I read on the website, guiding leaders and families towards purpose-driven success. A lot of great things on there. So before we get to the Crucible, Chris, talk about what was life growing up like for you. Talk about your parents, because they had a certain set of values and expectations for you that kind of influenced your path.
Well, absolutely. And thanks again for the invite to be here. So yeah, growing up, I grew up in a small town in Indiana, just west of the Indianapolis area. And my mom and dad were self-employed. My mom and dad owned a commercial laundry and dry cleaning business and a retail clothing business. And so I can remember, growing up and working alongside dad and mom as early as kindergarten. I would get out of kindergarten, I'd be working on the flat iron and folding sheets with the old ladies, their commercial laundry business, and just a lot of fond memories growing up, working alongside, my parents and my sisters as well. They both, we all worked together. Self-employment sometimes is not everything it's cracked up to be. So mom and dad wanted the kids to go off to school, get good grades, and get a real job. So that's what all three of us did. We all went to college. I went to a engineering school, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, and graduated from there in 1991. And then I was a mechanical engineer and went off into the metals industry at that point in time and started working in the metals industry.
Yeah, talk about pre-Crucible. What was your frame of mind as you sort of navigated your way through life?
Yeah, it's a great question because to your point, the values of my dad I always talk about with teams are, things like, integrity, honesty, and hard work. My mom was a very driven person as well. So really both parents, very driven, hard workers. And that's how we grew up. We grew up working hard. So, and grew up with, the anticipation that, if you worked hard, then you could achieve great things.
I guess 2008, was that the defining year? So, and I read somewhere that a few years back, maybe it was 2003, that your company got bought out, or at least your division by a private equity firm, which nothing against private equity, but that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
Because they tend to be focused purely on, I mean, it's fine to focus on money, but it's not always a long-term horizon. A lot of, certainly in corporate America, it's often, what's, quarterly earnings per share and how's that all work? And so it can change the dynamics of the company and how it looks at strategy and, well, say long-term potential is probably short-term potential. But so, yeah, once that happened, I imagine some people might have been nervous. Gee, what does this mean? And sometimes you get a right to be nervous. So leading up to 2008, it felt like you felt that something was going to happen, like the writing is on the wall. So talk about, how did you feel like you knew? Because it sure felt like when the conversation happened, hey, Chris, can you come to my office? Yeah, there's a certain tone in that conversation. Sometimes it's like, this doesn't sound good. So how did you kind of know?
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned 2003 and the buyout. So, prior to that time, I was on the fast track. In early 30s, one of the youngest site leaders in a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar manufacturing corporation. And so, and my success to that point was inspiring teams and employee engagement and really just, the facility I was at in 2002, 2003 timeframe was a turnaround type opportunity with a new acquisition and just really great success story. And then in 2003, what ended up happening was that the private equity firm took over. The gentleman that took over as president of the company, I wasn't necessarily 100% aligned with him initially on, myself and several on the regime. So actually several people in my regime got their papers during 2003 to exit. I was able to continue to stay on board, continue to build trust in that relationship. And for the next few years, we started to do a lot of great things with a turnaround from another facility and a new facility that we built in Arkansas in 2006 and 2007, which I had the privilege of leading the team to do. So, again, during that whole season, though, especially, again, kids were probably at this stage, I'm thinking 10 and 8 years old. My son, 10, daughter, 8 years old. And I'm doing a lot of traveling. So, in 2005, I'd leave out on a Monday and I'd be back on Fridays. Again, great success story. Same thing in 06, 07. We had a second house on a lake, and I can remember distinctly one summer that I never even saw our primary residence. I would meet the family at the lake house, and we'd enjoy a weekend together. I'd wash my clothes, and then I'd be off on Mondays again. So there was just things in my life that, I wasn't completely fulfilled, and just the priorities I was wrestling with, from a faith standpoint, I tell people I accepted Christ when I was in middle school. So there was a little bit of a faith element to things, and a little bit of conversations that I was trying to have with the Lord along the way, and some of these trips driving back and forth. But at the end of the day, I just was wrestling quite a bit on where I was at. And I tell people that I couldn't make the decision. It's the traditional golden handcuffs. Making a, pretty good 6-figure income. And again, having the house, the kids, the lake house, second house. Not that we were living extravagant lives, but, living, meaningful lives. And, so I tell people God made it for me. And so in 2008, when the economy tanked, myself and a couple other executives were approached with severance packages. And that moment, is kind of a very memorable moment on multiple occasions. So I think you kind of alluded to, I got a phone call to head back to the corporate office. I was at one of our manufacturing facilities. A couple of people had been let go the day before, and I just called my wife on the way there. And I said, honey, I think that today might be the day. And so I arrived back at the corporate office. I actually packed my stuff because I was like, I'm pretty confident this is it. So my stuff was in a box, crated up, ready to go. when the senior director of HR came in and said, "Hey, you got a moment to come down to the conference room." And so, he walked into the conference room and, of course, did the typical conversation around, "Hey, we're going to downsize, let you go." Walked, I drove a company car. So, cab ride on the way home, and they called the cab, and, it was we were just waiting there. The HR guy was so embarrassed because the cab was late. And so we're standing outside just waiting. So the cab driver finally comes up, and I'm getting in the car, and I said, "How's your day going?" So "I guess it's going better than yours." And I said, "You never know, brother. This could be the best day of the rest of my life."
Because he saw your little crate with your a dead giveaway that you might have got let go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So it's about a 45-minute ride from the corporate office to my house, and we enjoyed a great conversation. So good that once he got in my driveway, he wanted to continue the conversation. So he got out of the car. We continued the conversation, walked out to the pond behind my house, and had some good conversations about fishing, and took him back and showed him a fish that my son had caught, and just really had a great conversation with him. And he said, "Brother, you're going to be okay." He said, "I'm a cab driver, but I'm also a counselor on the side." That's really my primary role. And a lot about this is just how you react to your circumstances. And I can tell that, you're going to react in a positive way. So, and then stepping inside, Lisa was sitting there on the couch, and as I walked in with my box in hand, she remembers this to this day, is like seeing me walk in with that box and just, being brokenhearted, but yet screaming at the top of my lungs, "I'm free." And really feeling like that and experiencing that in that moment is like, yeah, it was tough, and nobody wants to go through that experience. However, there was a sense of freedom at that moment of saying, okay, don't know what's next, but I do know that this feels right.
So talk about those early days. I think you had, I don't know if it was 40 days, but a period of time in which you reflected basically as you journaled and prayed, well, God, what next? And I felt like, some people talk about doing business with God, or maybe it's God doing business with us, depending on how you look at it, I suppose. But it felt like those were, pivotal days in your life. So what were some of the thoughts and the discussions that were going on in your head between you and yourself, you and God, God and you? There's a whole series of dialogues going on. So talk a bit about those dialogues. As yes, you were free, but there was a lot of things to think about and consider. And gee, where am I going with my life? Where have I been? Where do I want to go? There was a lot of very deep discussions you were having.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Rick Warren's book, The 40-Day Purpose, what is it?
The Purpose-Driven Life.
Purpose-Driven Life, yeah. Was popular back in those days. So I think that's kind of what probably set the context of saying, hey, look, I'm just going to take 40 days. And so it was intentional that I wanted to carve out 40 days and just really lean into and take this time, knowing it was a great pivotal time in my life. Again, I had a severance package, so I had some time. I didn't necessarily have to rush and go find the next opportunity. And so it was very intentional that I wanted to take 40 days. But again, at that stage, it's like, okay, now what? Okay, I'm going to take 40 days. What's this look like? So, I would just get up in the morning and, pick up my Bible and a notepad, and I'd look for, a particular verse and start going through and journaling and writing at that point in time on just things that were coming to mind, thoughts that were coming to mind. And, and I actually, this is the season of my life too, where I started to pick up journaling. And I think it's just a discipline that I highly encourage everyone to do. I've been journaling ever since that time in my life. And, as I look back during that season, I tell folks that, there were, the themes that were really coming up is that I would have told you that God and family were priorities in my life. However, reality is I wasn't off track totally, but they weren't the priorities. It was all about my career and career success. And so, and even in the career aspects of things, I was huge on employee engagement, servant leadership. But at a deep level, what God started to convict me of is that a lot of that servant leadership was achieving what Chris was trying to achieve. So motivating teams was more about, okay, Chris and the goals and everything that he was trying to accomplish. I really got that personal conviction. It sounds harsh to say it that harshly, but it was, at the end of the day. So, reordering things, kind of stepping away from that and saying, okay, I want to really be intentional about reordering things. God, I really want to put you first. I want to put my family next. And then beyond that, then I want my career to kind of fall in alignment. So, it was during that season as well that I think, I started to work with vision statements for my life. We all do this for business a lot of times, but we sometimes neglect trying to do it for ourselves. And, I think a mission statement and a vision statement started to evolve at that point in time. One of the lens that I kind of filter through things even yet today that came is the experience freedom and flexibility to serve God wherever called without concern for income. So it was that's a lens that even today, it's just what I really filter things through is that experience of being able to experience that freedom and flexibility that I wasn't experiencing, because at the time, that I was doing all that traveling and everything, I was missing ball games. And that's the thing that I distinctly remember about my dad in self-employment was that, man, he worked hard. We worked hard. We worked a lot of Sundays and nights keeping the place running. But at the end of the day, I never remember my dad missing a ball game. And that was something that I looked at and said, look, I want to be that too. I don't know what this looks like for me. But I just know that from a value standpoint, I want to get some things realigned and make sure that my priorities are in order.
So we ask our guests all the time, folks, you may not know this, we ask our guests to fill out a form so we can ask intelligent questions when we're doing the interviews. And one of the things that you said, Chris, to the question about the best advice you could offer people was the most critical action is to slow down and listen. And you just described that a little bit. And we talk a lot at Beyond the Crucible about self-reflecting. In fact, we have what we call the actionable truths of Beyond the Crucible. And that's one of the top ones is self-reflection. And you sort of walked through that a little bit. After a setback, let me ask you this, right? The most critical action is to slow down and listen, but that can come. Yes, you were reading your Bible, you were communing with God, but even people who perhaps don't have the same faith that you have, it can come in the form of self-reflection, right? Because you talked a little bit about self-reflection. What we tell ourselves truthfully about ourselves is an important part of how we bounce back from a crucible. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And slowing down and taking time. My wife and I were actually just talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that during that season, I could have gone off and gotten another job. I could have started looking for the next corporate opportunity. But it was the fact that I took time and intentionally slowed down and said, okay, I'm not. And even to that point, career coaching wise, I actually encourage folks to identify what their runway is. And often that runway is longer than what they tell you. If they really stop and think about it. And then I said, break it out in thirds. And I said, for that first third, don't take anything. Just stop, slow down, listen, and open up to the world of possibilities. And really, and to your point, Gary, it's a lot of it is self-reflection too. It's getting into how am I wired? How am I created? What are my gifts? What are my talents? And in coaching, I think, you guys are both familiar with coaching process. And the first step of that is a lot of times is just getting people conscious of who they are. And so that was the season. And in the season that, I think that really when you get into the 40 days, that was a lot of it was just the self-reflection, getting conscious of who am I? What are my gifts? What are my talents? How am I created? And then I was like, okay, now how do you go from that, take that next step? Where do we go from here? And that's where the journey really began. That was just the beginning for me. And then the journey started to unfold from that point.
One of the things that happened then, which was frankly painful to read. There was one time when, I guess you've got two kids like Chris Jr. and Kylie, right? Yes. And then your daughter Kylie, something happened that day at school. And, so you were asking about it and you asked, some question, and your response was that Kylie said, "Why do you care? You haven't been home the past 5 years." That has got to be every parent. And as a dad, every dad's almost like worst nightmare. Talk about, and you're right, you say it's a punch to the gut, as it would be. There's self-reflection, and then that must have, you were thinking about this anyway, but that must have really said, okay, I got to do things differently, because I don't want to hear Kylie or Chris say that to me again. I mean, I know that's obvious, but talk a bit about that, because that had to have been painful, but amongst the pain, there was also value. It gave the opportunities. Okay, I'm going to do things differently.
Yeah, as you were just reading that, it brings back the experience, and almost I'm tearing up a little bit just thinking about the moment that all transpired, and again, that's truly how she felt in that time, and then in that moment, in that season, and it was humbling to really reflect back on that and say, "Wow!" As a mirror back to me. Something that I already kind of knew, but to hear that directly from her child. Matter of fact, we before I put things in the book, I made sure that I kind of reviewed them with the kids and said, "Hey, this is a circumstance that I put in the book," and we just talked about it this past year again, and so it brought back some memories of that season, and what's not in the book also that we cherish as a family is that she was approaching middle school at that time, but middle school started to be difficult years for her, and then into high school she really had a lot of mental health challenges, and ultimately transparently at age 15 was suicidal, and just some very difficult moments at that. And so, as a father, a couple things for that. One was I was blessed to be home to deal with that. So we look back on that season because I chose the career option that I did with coaching and the freedom and flexibility to be home more. I was there to support the family at that season of life. And I was the one that was taking her to counseling sessions and various things, which was a tremendous time of our, looking back from that aspect of our life. But yeah, I mean, as a father too, though, don't you, even bet or have to doubt that I was wrestling with, okay, all these years I was away from home. Is that the reason we are where we are today? Did I, because of not being there as a father, was I the absent father that led to a lot of the mental health challenges that she was suffering from? So yeah, there was some seasons there that, again, go back to self-reflection. I really had to start wrestling during those seasons as well about, me as a father. Now we've come out on the other side of that, and sure, there's things, but again, I wasn't the cause for all that. Now that we're on the other side of it.
So I want to talk a bit about calling and vocation. You've got so many good things in your book. I love this quote by Frederick, is it Buchner? Not quite sure how to pronounce that. But,
Buchner, I think is probably it.
Buchner. Okay. Your calling is where your deepest passions meet the world's greatest needs. I think I've come across that, but I love that. And you were really trying to find out your calling. I love the questions you have in here that somebody posed to you about helping to, figure out calling. What do you think about most often? What do you worry about? What do you complain about? Where do you run for comfort? Where does the majority of your money go? What affirmation do you crave? What makes you happy? How do you describe yourself to others? And I think somewhere in here, you talk about your gift of being administration and wisdom. And so talk about, because that must have been huge, because a lot of people run around in life not knowing how they're wired. I think you came across Halftime at one point that also has a lot of hugely valuable material. So talk about how did that help you navigate your life as you started off in coaching and consulting, just really understanding from your perspective how God wired you? That must have been huge, because a lot of people, they just run off, get a job, and they're not thinking about, gee, what's my gifting and wiring? Just off they go. What am I passionate about? It's like, I'm passionate about being able to pay my mortgage and rent. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. And that's it. So just talk about what that meant for you and why it's so important for people.
Yeah, you mentioned Bob Buford in Halftime, and it was during that 40-day season or shortly following that I ran across that book. And again, the theme through that is from success to significance. Actually, I had somebody at Halftime just after my book launched mentioned to me, said, hey, I think your book title is actually Buford's original title, From Success to Surrender. But they told him that it would never sell because of the word surrender. And I went back to Bob's passed away, so nobody knows. But yeah, they believe that is, I went back to Halftime and they said they do believe that is true. So, but also what they talk about in that is that in order to go to significance, they do talk through people around this whole process of what's surrender look like. So the light bulb coming on and starting to ask the question around significance, what's significance? And just really starting to, I was never in the first half of my life trying to look through the lens of what's significance. And so it was during the season that I was like, okay, significance, what does that look like? And then even things like, hey, were we created on purpose for a purpose? Again, never wrestled with any of those kind of things before. So starting to kind of try to process through, hey, are we created on purpose for a purpose? And if so, so if we're called to do something, then how specific is that calling? So that's always the paradox that I think, that over the last, now probably 15 years, I've wrestled with, watched other people wrestle with, is like, okay, they really wrestle with, okay, if, in my worldview, if God has, a specific calling, then how specific is that calling? So yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to work through that. I think the light bulb that's come on for me, though, is that, yeah, I believe that all of us are created for a specific purpose. And ultimately, we're wired with gifts, and like you mentioned, administration, wisdom, faith is the other one as well. That's a spiritual gift of mine, and then just the leadership abilities. All those gifts. So those are the ways that I'm wired. And then how do you walk that out? Is there a specific way or a purpose? And what I also did and fell in the trap of a lot of times, which I see happens a lot of times, is I started to tie it to a vocation. Mm-hmm. And now that where I'm at today, so my purpose, simply stated, is to come alongside leaders and help them discover their purpose and intentionally fulfill that purpose. That's what I'm created to do. In short, And so looking through that lens, what I discovered is like, yeah, I do that as a coach. But I also, we'll get to it probably here in a few minutes. I was president and CEO of a company for 7 years during this journey as well. And I was still fulfilling that purpose through. And it also goes back to, what I told you earlier about, having a vision statement, experiencing freedom and flexibility to serve God wherever called without concern to income. Again, when you go into evaluating president and CEO roles, those were lenses that I, kind of filtered that through. So yeah, this whole aspect around purpose and helping people discover what that is for them in their lives is something I'm passionate about. My sense is it's something you're passionate about as well.
Oh, absolutely. But it's interesting. Your journey back was not necessarily a linear, smooth one. It might not have been the same level of crucible, but there were challenges. Life is not easy. It reminds me, one of my favorite quotes from a former Prime Minister of Australia back in 1975 during the election, Malcolm Fraser. He was a conservative. And in a moment of madness and honesty, he said life wasn't meant to be easy. How many politicians have you ever heard say that? It's just like, it's true, but it's not really a good political sales line. But anyway, but it's true. So one of the things that people of faith and beyond wrestle with is most people these days, it may not be religious necessarily, but they're spiritual. They want to make a difference. And so sometimes for believers, there can be a sense, well, if I really want to be, fully on board for the kingdom and for God and Jesus, gosh, I need to be in some overtly Christian ministry. And there was a bit of wrestling with that. And then a number of people said, no, God needs people in the marketplace who are believers. It's not so much from my perspective saying, Jesus lives every day, but more in how you treat people with integrity and, honesty and care for them and love them. And as I look at it, but yeah, you wrestled with that, a bit. And as we'll get into, you even had a couple times when you almost became executive pastor of two different churches, one in Kentucky, one in Indianapolis. So it's not like so talk about that whole, because that seemed like a through line too, is it okay for me to do my consulting, coaching, and then CEO of a business? And because it's easy sometimes in church to see people in missionaries overseas, and it's like, I guess that's the A team, right? I guess I must not be the A team, which is completely biblically wrong, but it's tempting to fall into that. Oh, I'm not leading some nonprofit to help bring clean water to a third world country. I'm just making money. Even if you're not a person of faith, it's easy to believe I'm a sellout because I'm not really helping people. Heaven forbid, I'm a corporate lawyer or investment banker. How's that redemptive? I'm not saying that's true, but it's easy to think that. So talk about that, what that meant for you and what that means more generally, this wrestling with, your path.
Well, you're right. It's a big part of the story. And for me, there's a marketplace ministry that's headquartered here in Indianapolis, Indiana. So in 2009, I had some people encouraging me to step in and join it and sit in it as it's personal advisory boards for Christian business owners. And so I chose to go ahead and sit in an advisory board. And, I distinctly remember one advisory board in February 2011 where I walked into the room and I said, we rate our issues on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely critical and need to get on the table. And so I said, I guess I better say I got a 10 today. And the facilitator says, well, what is it? I said, well, I got a $12,000 tax bill, and I'm really not sure I'm going to pay. However, that's not the issue. The issue is, am I doing what God's calling me to be doing in life? It's because it's like there's just things we're not clicking. Again, using the financial barometer, I wasn't, again, still trying to live the 6-figure lifestyle. Hadn't backed out. We didn't really downsize a whole lot in our lifestyle. And then in 2012, that marketplace ministry began to expand nationally. And so they needed somebody to step in the Indianapolis area and start facilitating groups in the Indianapolis area to allow the leadership team to really focus on growing the organization. And so in 2012, I joined as what chapter president was the title that they use, and started facilitating groups. And in 2012, the whole year, I would talk to people, and 2 out of 3 people I would talk to would join. And so I was like, man, this is it. I built 4 groups, and I distinctly remember sitting with the CEO of this organization in January of 13, kind of looking back on 12 and saying, hey, you're only a few people away from ultimately being a place where you've got financial sustainability and so on. And then lo and behold, in 2013, I talked to 100 people and 2 people joined. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? So really wrestling again, thinking that, okay, I marketplace ministry, facilitating this group. So I was doing what God was calling me to do, and thinking now I'm in this season of reevaluating. Okay. And then even getting to the place where, just through some unique circumstances, I take a spiritual retreat day generally every first Friday of the month. And through these circumstances, having a spiritual retreat, I'd gone to Kenya in September, had a good experience there, and just, came back from that, and in October was really wrestling, trying to understand, and just, through some unique circumstances, felt that God was really convicting me, don't turn my father's house into a marketplace. And so it was, again, coming back to money, really convicting me at a heart level, and that's one of the biggest things that as you read the book that I really had to turn loose of, and still today, is continually, my thorn in my flesh, probably, of just financial security and turning loose of the financial security in life, and, leaning in on the promises that provision will be there. So that ended up, at that season, I wrestled, ultimately ended up wrestling so much that I went to the organization and said, hey, look, these groups that I'm actually getting paid, a substantial amount of money to facilitate, I'm going to have to back down on because I'm so convicted over this, and give them up. I kept one group that was kind of a nonprofit group that I've still facilitated even to this day. But I needed to transition at that point in time. And that's, 2015 timeframe. And then that's where it picks up where you alluded to, well, maybe I'm being called to be an executive pastor. So I started interviewing at that point.
Yeah, just one of the things you talk about in the book is wrestling with financial security and money as an idol. You call it, which I'm familiar with. We all have idols where we can put our significance in things that are not eternal or not necessarily in line with our beliefs and values. So that's something you wrestled with, which we all have them. And so that really was a bold step of faith to do what you did. But just before you got into, I think it's Uplift,
Uplift produce, Uplift good food purpose.
If there was a plan for you to be in ministry, it sure seemed like there were two big signs that not in a traditional sense. If you believe God speaks through circumstances, and they were not easy. The one in Kentucky and the one in Indianapolis. I think your son at one point said, hey, basically don't get your hopes up too much, and maybe he had a prophetic word. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's definitely a memorable moment as well. Yeah. The one in Kentucky. We really felt the handwriting was all over the wall that we were going. And to your point, we were sitting at dinner one evening, and Christopher says, hey, you guys got to stop getting your hopes up about Kentucky. And I'm like, son, we never know what God has in store, but man, the handwriting is pretty clear on this one. And he's like, well, okay, but you might need to eat some humble pie. And we generally don't have our phones at the table, but it was sitting behind me, and I heard the phone buzz, and I just grabbed it and picked it up, and lo and behold, it was the email in the inbox from the senior pastor saying, hey, we're choosing to go in another direction. So, boy, if you don't think that was a humility, test of humility, that was.
It feels like in both cases, I guess you probably don't know, but you were down to the last two or three. You weren't like one of 50.
I was second runner up on both occasions. Yeah.
So what did you make of that? Saying, God, what's the deal here? Why get me so close and then shut the door on my face? So I'm sure you've had those conversations. Did you get any sense of what all that meant and why you got so close, but then the answer's no?
I think it's just part of the whole journey of stripping a lot of things away, and faith and trust. And then again, stripping my finances away too. At the end of the day, we went negative net worth. We went from a substantial net worth to negative net worth during this season. So we were, at this, as I was interviewing it for the second one in 2000, late 2015, early 2016, we were going negative at that point in time. And, again, wrestling with the fact that, shouldn't I be earning a living and trying? Not that I wasn't trying to do some other things to earn a living. It just wasn't happening for me. I think just coming to the end of myself, we talk, sometimes we use the death to self experience, and that was kind of, like the final nail in the coffin for me, I think, is like that whole season of interviewing for, about a year period of time and not being able to even land myself in a church. It's kind of like, are you kidding me? I can't even go serve at a church.
So that wasn't to be. And then in 2016, you became COO CEO, of Uplift. So, because you were there for 7 years, so that sounds like that was really fulfilling. You felt like you were doing good for this company, providing sustainable, healthy produce. That must have been a pretty cool season. Yeah, you're using your gift of administration and faith. You must have felt like, this is it, Lord. I'm here for the next 20 years. Let's go.
Yeah, the quarterback was back on the field, man. It's one thing to be a coach. It's another one to get the quarterback back on the field. So, yeah, I mean, through some, circumstances, I had a couple friends that had approached me really just to, as sometimes happens in the coaching consulting world, is to step in, help them out. And that's how, it was initially, is hey, can you step in? And indoor farming, growing lettuce indoors was under lights, was ultimately the business venture. That was an emerging technology all over the world, candidly, back in that season. And in the U.S. was really starting to take root back in the season of life, and stepped into that. And as you often do as a coach consultant, for 6 months, kind of determined, hey, the current business model was not going to be successful. Ended up deciding to go ahead and let the original founder go at that season. But we're sitting there with significant investment funding, and went to the board and said, hey guys, you can get out now, cut your losses, or we can go, there's a lot of excitement in this area. We can go look and see and try to find somebody to partner up with, and that can provide a turnkey farm solution, and we can go have a good run at this. And so they chose the latter. U.S. wise, just we did due diligence on some folks in the U.S. Just couldn't find the right partner with the right technology emerging at that time, and so came across a company out of the Netherlands. Plant Lab was the name of them, and really struck up a great relationship with them, and came to a place of deciding that we wanted to partner with them in a 50-50 joint venture on bringing their technology to the U.S. So yeah, to your point, yes, in the zone, at this season of things. Things were, it's like this business is never completely easy, right? But, ultimately waking up every morning energized, thinking, man, we're finally there, man. You've kind of, from a Christian's perspective, hey, you molded my heart, you got my heart, my values in the right place, and ultimately, let's go do this together. And so to that point, Uplift, the brand that we launched was Uplift Good Food on Purpose. It was, somewhat of a social impact. There was a community, a nonprofit that was one of our investors in it, in combination with, several for-profit folks. And, really had a plan to get back to the community, create jobs in that community, and then healthy, produce. And that ended up moving forward to, a, potential partnership with a large food distributor, Cisco, throughout the worldwide food distributor, and had intent to build multiple farms starting out in the U.S. and major metropolitan areas in the U.S. And started to go through the construction estimates on a farm. And this is kind of fast forwarding we're all the way into 2022 now, that we were fast forwarding into basically, and came off of that. And Pompano Beach, Florida was going to be the first, joint venture farm there, highly automated, show place, good place to fly people into and kind of show the place off. And just once we got all the estimates in, it didn't pencil out on paper. So we had to make the tough decision to pull out of the North American market. And unfortunately, since that time, this past year, pull out of the worldwide as well. The company shut down worldwide. But great run. From a culture standpoint, probably, other people listening to this might debate this, but I think we were known as having probably the best operation here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the reason I attribute that is a lot around the culture that we were able to build. It was very much employee engagement, I'm a huge Patrick Lenciani fan, the 5 dysfunctions of the team. So trust, conflict, those kind of, the 5 aspects of that. So, and then, brought in some great young leadership, also brought in folks that were second chance employment as well. I mean, people that had historical backgrounds, and we're just thankful to have a job and have a great family to come into and work with on a day-to-day basis.
So when you mentioned in 2023, when that company decided to pull out of the North American market, talk about what that was you were going through, because that's another season of reflection. You've had a number of seasons of reflection, and this is another opportunity. It's like, Lord, can I just be done with these seasons of reflection? At least not this kind. I think I got the message. It's like, well, Chris, I got a few more lessons. Oh, come on. Enough of the lessons. I'm ready to graduate. But such as life is really that way. So that must have been tough, because it's like, well, now what? I was in the zone, as you said, the quarterback's on the field. That must not have been easy when that ended. All the business reasons made sense of why potentially, but still, what were you thinking then when that ended? Because it must not have been easy.
You kind of captured it. It was like, okay, now what? Why again? Are we going here again? It's like, I've been here before. So, to your point though, I think as that happened, you always go back into reflection mode. It was like, okay, what am I supposed to be learning from all this? What are you teaching me from all this? And, I tell people that it was subtle, but it was, and again, this is in my world and in my belief system, but, being more connected to the dream than I was connected to my Lord. So I started chasing after the dream and all the great things we were doing together, and kind of, subtle, but, left that relationship, one-on-one relationship I had with my Heavenly Father. Not totally in behind, but it just wasn't like it once was and now is. So
yeah, just for listeners, whether you're people of faith, like, Chris is, the broader issue is you can have a set of beliefs, but we talk about this a lot, mission drift, and you can subtly drift so that the dream, the mission becomes an idol. There's nothing wrong with having, healthy, nutritious produce. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good vision. But the key is make sure that, that doesn't become an idol. Hey, look at me. I'm Chris Arnold, and, I'm doing these wonderful things, and you should respect me. And that probably is not over on the top of your mind, but there might have been a few grains in there. There was that, and that can happen to any of us, whether irrespective of what your belief system. We talk about idols a lot. You never want to have money or what you do as an idol. So I want to talk a bit about what you do now, because you say that this whole thing has clarified your calling to use your gift of wisdom to lead people in the intentional discovery and fulfillment of their God-given purpose. And I love what you talk about is the truths that you say echo through the book. And these are profound. Success isn't measured by what we achieve, but by what we become. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match our schedule. Our greatest growth often comes through our deepest struggles. True freedom is found in surrender, not control. Every closed door can hide unexpected blessings. Ministry happens wherever God places it. So talk about what you do now, and maybe some of the key 2 or 3 things that God has taught you in this journey.
Yeah. Well, what I do now is coming alongside leaders and their families is another thing. My wife, Lisa, and I she's joined me in this effort. We just a sideline on her part of the story. We started doing premarital counseling back in 2019. Some girls approached her and said, hey, will you do premarital counseling? So we kind of evolved into that world. And then since that time, have partnered up with our church, and we do premarital, and then I'm also ordained to do weddings. So marriage and family is an element that we brought to it. And then my daughter-in-law also has come alongside us as well with my son and their health journeys. And she's a health coach too. So we're really looking to come alongside, leaders and their families, help them go through this process of alignment. And start to ask the questions and recognizing, like we've talked, that you don't figure this all out in 40 days. I mean, there is a journey that you need to go through. So, and then that's also part of why, the book was actually written, in 2018. It wasn't until this past year that I actually published it. Just a quick sideline on that. One of the things that I was really wrestling to finish the book. And the reason being is that I wanted to get to the top of the mountain and look back and be able to tell that uplift story, and be able to talk about, hey, here was the journey. Yeah, I went through the valley and, ultimately, but man, whenever the 23, event transpired and that ended up, and if you read in the epilogue of the book, I talk about, hey, God really convicted me that, hey, son, it's not about the particular destination, it's about the journey. And so, that was really what sparked the idea of, I'd always wanted to tell my story, because I felt like people, could learn from that journey. And so that's basically what I ended up doing. Was the book was, getting very intentional about finishing the book, and getting it published, but also in the effort of publishing the book, making sure that it's a teaching memoir. So as you know, ultimately at the end of each chapter, there's questions that are reflection questions. There's also, we've built into this also, a whole, I'll share more about our website and information later on, but if you come to our information, you'll see that there's a 40-day journey because the 40-day journey was so important to me. So we put together a devotional series and a study companion guide that kind of goes with all this stuff. And again, it's really packaging up a lot of the things that I learned in my journey, such that in this coaching relationship, it's kind of the foundation and a lot of times the starting point for someone to come in and start to kind of work alongside and wrestle through some of this stuff.
As we kind of close here, you've got some profound thoughts that you're talking about in the epilogue. And this is really worthy of people reflecting on. This season has crystallized the core message of the book. True transformation happens in the walking, not the arriving. We can get so focused about getting to the top of the mountain, which you did, even, back in the Uplift days. I want to write the book when I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm sure now you'd say that was probably a wrong premise, because it's not about the top of the mountain, which, obviously you've learned. And, I've certainly tried to learn. Each closed door, each desert season, each moment of surrender shaped us more than any achievement could. Just the beauty and the power of surrender. You talk about these three truths. Every step of surrender shapes us more into his image. In other words, God's image. Our greatest ministry often flows from our deepest struggles. I've got a whole podcast talks about my failures. It's pretty much, other people's challenges, but for me, my failures, I've learned a lot through that. When we walk with God, we're always exactly where we need to be. And I love this thing. And I don't know if you have it there on your desk, but there's like a little, I don't know what you call it, if it's a sailboat or something.
Yeah.
Ship.
Yeah.
So, and on it says, the man who walks with God always gets to his destination. Just the power of God, whoever you feel is up there, your core beliefs and values. It's walking with those rather than focus on the destination. Do you have that there just to show people?
It's across the room. I can go grab it if you'd like me to.
Why not? Why not? Because it's a pretty powerful thing. Might want to grab it. So,
yeah, it's across the room where I can look at it. But
there we go. And on that boat, again, the man who walks with God always gets to his destination. So, folks, what we're saying here is it's about the journey, not the destination. Don't get so focused on, gosh, when I get to the CEO or get $1 million or 5 million or whatever, then I'll be happy. No, I don't care what your beliefs and values are. Success in of itself doesn't make you happy. It's the journey. And that's really, I think, maybe what you're talking about, surrender, right? It's like, it's enjoy the journey, surrender the outcome. Is that like a fair summary as we kind of close?
I couldn't have said it any better.
That sound you heard, folks, was the captain turning on the fasten seatbelt sign, indicating that our plane is descending to land this episode of Beyond the Crucible. Until we do that, though, so put your peanut bags away, but we're not quite there yet. I'd be remiss, Chris, if I didn't ask you how our listeners and viewers can reach you on the internet, learn more about your coaching and anything else that you may have that they can explore.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways. Probably the easiest way is to go to our book website, which is FromSuccessToSurrender.com. And then through that, you can navigate to a couple other different sites. I've got ChrisArnold.org and then the Lasting Legacy Collective.com. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. I think that's probably how we got connected.
Warwick, as always, the last question or questions of the guest are yours.
So, Chris, there might be somebody listening today. Maybe today's their worst day. Maybe they've been fired from that job that was either in the C-suite or was going to lead to the C-suite. Maybe they were like your son, who had a dream of being a high school quarterback and maybe college quarterback, and they have injuries that basically the doctor says you got to give it up. Maybe you're either the C-suite executive that got fired or the high school kid that could have been the quarterback like his dad. So what would a word of hope be to somebody that's in that position, which they feel like my dreams have just turned to ashes, and what now?
Well, first of all, it's acknowledging that, it's not easy. I mean, it is, a painful experience, as much as it's looking back, telling the story and, even talking about the fact that, freedom, walking into the door, it's easy to sit here and say that, but yet, yes, there still was a lot of pains and suffering through that. So experiencing that, yet recognizing it's not the end of the world. And that, the story that hopefully you've heard today is that, I've been enjoying life, and it was a transitional, very pivotal point in my life that freed me up to do some great things on going out and serving people in a completely different perspective, which, hopefully you can tell that I'm, going with great joy on a day-to-day basis.
Folks, I've been in the communications business long enough to know when the final word's been spoken on a subject, and our guest, Chris Arnold, just spoke it. Warwick, we just finished our discussion with our guest, Chris Arnold. And as we always do when we have guests on the show, I ask you, what's the big takeaway from Chris's Crucible story and his bounce back story and his life of significance story? What's the big learning that we walk away with from our interview with Chris today?
Chris Arnold is a fascinating guy. He went through the crucible of being on track to doing exceptionally well at a company in Indianapolis. He was making, quite a lot of money, and with the prospect of making more, and was going to very successful, worked hard. And on the surface, it seemed like he was living his values as a person of faith. But yet in practice, he was away most of the week. He missed a lot of his son and daughter's games and activities they're involved in. And so, in a sense, it's a very sobering lesson, whether you're a person of, faith, and, his faith in Christ is, of course, who he is, but whether you're a person of that faith, some other religious faith, or just more broadly, just other spiritual paradigms, it's very easy to drift from your beliefs and values and your mission. And it's very easy to have money or success as an idol. Nothing wrong with success. But when your whole sense of self gets defined in what you do, how much you make, that is never good. And so when he got fired and let go, he had enough self-awareness to realize there was a problem. He wouldn't have left voluntarily, because how do you give up that kind of career income and prospects? But he felt freedom, but yet it wasn't an easy journey back. There were a number of things, like he thought, gosh, I'm a person of faith. Maybe I should be an executive pastor. Twice, it got down to 2 people, and he was not the person that was picked. That's kind of devastating, is what's up with that. Then is CEO for, 6-7 years of a company called Uplift that is about, producing, healthy food. And that ended up ending. It's been a journey coming alongside people, coaching them, consulting with them, mentoring folks, including families. And his profound wisdom is, he says, true transformation, it happens in the walking, not the arriving. It's not about, getting to the top of the mountain. Life is never about, when I get to the top of the mountain, I'll be happy. Life is about being happy in the journey, having a sense of joy through the bad times and the good times. Hard to have joy in the bad times. I fully realize that. We've all been through that. But just saying, life is going to have its ups and downs, but enjoying the journey, the times that feel like that are tough, there can be so much learning and wisdom that both Gary and I have certainly learned in our own lives. And so it is really about the journey, not the destination. This is something I'm sure you might have heard before, but Chris Arnold's life is a testament to, don't focus on the destination, focus on the journey, and make sure that you live your beliefs and values along the way. Don't be that mom, don't be that dad who, when your kids grow up, if you have kids say, mom, dad, you were never around. I was hurting. I had a big game. You were not there. You were not present. I needed you and you didn't show up. There's always, hopefully there's always forgiveness. There's always redemption. But you don't want to be that mom or dad. You don't want to be that sister, that brother, that uncle, that aunt, that friend who was not around. You want to be somebody that lives your beliefs and values and not just have them as a bumper sticker, as the company that a lot of us have heard of, Enron, that was very notorious for, went under because they had all sorts of scandals and financial impropriety, but yet their mission was all about caring people and uplifting them. But they weren't living that. You don't want to be, CEO of an Enron kind of company when you're not living your beliefs and values. You don't want to be the kind of person that says, yes, that person, their beliefs and values sounded good, but they really didn't live it. And, their family, their friends would all say that. You don't want to be that to be your legacy. So Chris has spent years trying to make sure that he lived in light of his beliefs and values. And even when he was trying, after he got fired from that company all those years ago in 2008, it still wasn't easy. And he was trying. It still was tough not to have, finances and success as an idol. So it's not only is life a journey trying to live in light of your beliefs and values. That isn't easy, but let us at least try. And when we go through challenges, let's see them as gifts that happen, for us and not to us, and say, okay, maybe I need to up my game in terms of living my beliefs and values. Maybe I'm too focused on the destination, not the journey. So a lot of wisdom that we can learn from Chris Arnold.
So until the next time we're together, please remember this. We know your crucible experiences are difficult. Chris, despite the fact that he chuckled quite a bit through talking through his, despite the fact that when he went through his really big crucible, he actually said, I'm free at the end of it. There were some struggles that went with that. But here's the good, but you heard it here today, the good news about his story, and it can be the good news about your story too. It's not the end of your story. Your crucible isn't. In fact, if you learn the lessons from that crucible and you apply those lessons moving forward, the destination it can lead you to is the greatest destination you can ever reach, and that is a life of significance. Welcome to a journey of transformation with the Beyond the Crucible assessment. Unlike any other, this tool is designed to guide you from adversity to achievement. As you answer a few insightful questions, you won't just find a label like the helper or the individualist. Instead, you'll uncover your unique position in the journey of resilience. This assessment reveals where you stand today, the direction you should aim for, and crucially, the steps to get there. It's more than an assessment. It's a roadmap to a life of significance. Ready? Visit beyondthecrucible.com. Take the free assessment and start charting your course to a life of significance today.